This is Dr Sadaf Ashraf. I'm a postdoc within the University of Aberdeen, working on arthritis and pain research.
Dr Gael Morrow at the University of Aberdeen and Oxford in the field of haemostasis.
Dr Clara, a material scientist at Oxford University.
Dr Anjali, Shah. I'm co-chair of the UK Research Staff Association and an epidemiologist based at the University of Oxford. And you are listening to a National PostDoc Conference special on the Academy's Developing Practice podcast.
So Sadaf, Gael, Clara and Anjali, my guest co-host Michael Robinson and I are really pleased to be speaking to you today for this National PostDoc Conference special. We're delighted to talk to you about the new realities researchers face, a key theme of the National PostDoc Conference hosted by the University of Liverpool, which is taking place in September 2021. But before we get started, it would be great if you could tell us a little bit about your background and how you've arrived at the position you're in today. So Clara, if we start with you.
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Dr Clara Barker. I'm a material scientist at the University of Oxford. I run the Centre for Applied Superconductivity. I'm also the chair of the LGBT plus advisory group to Oxford University, Dean of Equality and Diversity at Linacre College, and I'm on various E&D panels such as the Royal Society. So yeah, many roles, I think.
Wonderful, thank you. And Sadaf, how about yourself?
So I'm slightly junior to Clara there. So I did my undergraduate from King's College and did my master's there. Then I went on to do my PhD from the University of Nottingham, and I did a few postdocs before moving to University of Aberdeen, and I came here in 2018. And like Clara, since I've been here, I've sort of got myself involved in various committees. On top of doing my own research, I've got involved in teaching and being part of, various committees that we have in the university, such as the IDEAL, which is about inclusivity, diversity and equality for all, as well as being part of the race equality charter within the university. So yeah, like Clara, I've got many roles on top of being a postdoc.
Wonderful, thank you. That's great. Anjali, how about yourself?
Hello, I'm Anjali Shah. I'm an epidemiologist and a research manager at the University of Oxford. My research at the moment is studying fractures and how to reduce second fractures happening. I, like the others, have a number of different hats. I've sat on a lot of university committees. I am currently the chair of the UK Research Staff Association, and through that I sit on the National Concordat, the Research and Development Concordat strategy group. I have had a varied career. I started out at London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine doing my PhD in childhood leukemia trends. And then I spent a long time studying cancer survival, but the money dried up in my area from when I moved to Oxford working at the Child Cancer Research Group. So I worked for a short time in maternal health. Now, for the last 6 years, I've worked in the orthopaedic department here. Also, I have just finished a 3-year part-time role as a researcher developer. So I have supported researchers across Oxford as well as nationally through my chairing role. And I've been involved with a lot of the funders, UKRSA, Royal Society, Wellcome, with their initiatives for improving research culture.
And Gael, yourself?
Thank you. So I would say I'm probably a lot more junior than everyone else. So I finished my PhD in 2018 at the University of Aberdeen, and I then went to the University of Oxford, did a postdoc there for 2 years, and then last year I just came back to Aberdeen. So the lab I worked in Oxford, it's a collaboration with the lab in Aberdeen, so it's worked out very well for me to go between the two institutes. So at the moment I'm still mainly focusing on my own research, but starting to expand my responsibilities, looking for summer students, and just got accepted for first PhD student and things like that.
Wonderful, thank you. I'll hand over to Michael.
Thanks, Alex. Hello, everyone. So with projects like the Wellcome Trust's Reimagine Research campaign, which have highlighted the want and need by the research community to improve research culture, and the importance of which has been further increased by the global pandemic. So I was interested in hearing more from you all about what changes you would like to see to the research environment, how COVID-19 has maybe impacted on your thinking, or things that have been incorporated during COVID-19 which you'd like to see continue in the long term. Does have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to run a number of welcome culture cafes on how we'd improve research culture, and a number of ideas came out from that. Some are quick wins and some are longer term things. So first off, it's just getting the data on contract lengths. And I think there's definitely a push to have fewer short contracts. They reduce the number of 2 years or less contracts. And actually, since my PhD a long time ago, most of my contracts at the outset have been a year or 18 months. They have been short. And I've been able to transfer between fields because of my epidemiology and statistical skills. So I think it's recognizing that we've got technical and core staff who are not going to follow the traditional academic pathway to professor, but they are specialists in their area, whether they're program managers or statisticians or lab managers. We need longer term secure funding for our technical staff. There are very few posts available to become a professor. So I think there needs to be better careers support for people who want to transition successfully to another career. So we've been advocating for a long time to in the UK, start a big project, looking at the people who've got a PhD and following their career trajectory forwards. And I think it needs to be less about individuals and how brilliant an individual is, and a bit more about team science.
Really agree with that. I think it's the obvious choice for everyone. What they would like to change in academia is less short-term contracts. And I think it is a big problem that if you don't want to become a PI and go down the route to climb up to professor, there isn't really another option. You can maybe do 1 or 2 postdocs, and then you kind of start to struggle to get the funding. And then you kind of have to decide whether to move out of academia or not, which I think is such a shame when you're so specialised in your research field to just lose that person. There's no support from the universities or funding bodies to keep that skill.
No, I agree with what Gail and Anjali have said. I think there is a lot of pressure for postdocs, if they want to stay in academia, to have lots of different roles to show their initiative. And there is that lack of work-life balance as well, which sort of incorporates into that. And, I think every time, like Gail has mentioned, you do a different postdoc or you move around, you become highly specialized. And, there is that pressure for you to always achieve more, to do more, to stand out as an academic. A lot of us, we love what we do, and that's why we get involved in all of these other extra roles within the university, whether that's through teaching or being involved in committees and so forth. But I find it slightly distressing to a certain extent that there is a huge pressure on early career, mid-career postdocs, if they want to stay in academia, to show their career trajectory, how they're moving up. And in terms of moving around, there is lack of support. If a postdoc who has been in academia for a long time to move into the industry, their criteria is completely different, regardless of the fact that we have a lot of skills, that are transferable. But, there is still that sort of glass ceiling that once you've done quite a few postdocs, you can't really move around because you become highly specialized. And what Anjali hit upon before as well is that, especially in academic institutions, there isn't a huge distinction between staff who are permanent technical support staff and those who are postdocs. What is there that postdocs have to offer, which is different to the technical staff, because they're highly expert in their field in running a core facility, whether that's, a confocal microscope or, doing highly specialized techniques. So what is there that postdocs have to offer, which is different to the technical staff, so that the higher management will retain us. So there's all these pressures. I mean, I can go on and on. I'm going to get someone else to sort of chip in.
Yeah, I mean, the short-term contracts, we don't fund, as postdocs, I think while I was doing postdocs, I must have had 3 or 4, maybe 5 contracts. And since I moved into the more technical side, I've had also 3, 4, 5 contracts. It's never-ending short-term contracts. I will say when it comes to the funding bodies, as well as funding our staff and making sure that we're actually giving them stability. I mean, there's nothing worse than you get towards the end of a research contract and you're not concentrating on writing papers, you're concentrating on trying to get that funding. And the funding takes so long to arrive. I've got 2 things out there now, one as an RA, one as a fellowship, and when am I going to hear those results? Maybe 6 months, maybe 8 months. It's a long-term thing. I think at least we're actually starting to be honest with the diversity or lack of diversity from the research facilities. So the Royal Society, the UKRI have been doing loads and loads of, they've been speaking to lots of people to try and ask about the culture and what can we improve. And hopefully they work. In fact, I'm going to another UKRI one after this recording. And so it's good that they're starting to ask people, and it's great with the reports that have come out, again, the UKRI and the Royal Society on, binary genders. Women are less likely to apply for large grants, but they're also less likely to get them. When it comes to race, we see the same thing. When it comes to disability, we see the same thing. At least we're no longer pretending that those barriers aren't there. So that's a real positive step. And it's just, hopefully we will actually be listened to. We're being asked to talk a lot at the moment, but will that lead to real change? Will we see that those numbers shift? Will we see that those numbers, like I say, at least we're being open about those numbers, but will they start to shift? And sort of tying into the whole short-term funding and everything, do they really value the outreach, the equality work, the equity work? I mean, does that really? So I've worked as a technical post for 7 years. I'm now trying to get back into research, and I'm leveraging all the outreach and everything else that I've done. Will I get anything, or is it that I don't have the papers? What do they really value? So let's see. I think it'll be an interesting test case.
So do you guys think that the bottom line is the sort of realistic deliverables that are expected from postdocs? Because like you're saying, we have short-term contracts, we're expected to do a lot of extra work on top of doing our research project. So do you think the accountability lies with all of the stakeholders in terms of giving us realistic deliverables that within those short-term contracts, this is what we need to achieve, but the goalpost seems to always get moved further and further away because we need to come across as being, competitive or, showing how we're different?
So I think a theme from the culture cafes that came up was that there is a lot of hidden work that isn't remunerated, isn't recognised. And that's why the funders are making moves so that the Royal Society and then UKRI have adopted a narrative CV. So saying more about what did you do, what did you contribute, and more about, how have you supported research culture or EDI initiatives. So I think very slowly that is coming, that recognition, that there should be recognition for doing all these other things. And I hope at some point in the future, there'll be remuneration appropriately as well. I know at the 2 institutions I've worked at that when it comes to promotions or progression, number one's research, then it's teaching, and then a small proportion is about citizenship, even though we might spend a lot of time on citizenship activities and believe passionately about these things, as just as passionately as we believe in our research. So I think things are starting to change, but it will be slow to trickle through to all the funders.
But I will say that I think what's nice is with the future leader fellowships that have come out of the UKRI recently, it's about, it's not necessarily about a particular project, it's about funding a researcher and funding them for quite a long time and giving them the money and the opportunity to grow. And so I think that is a really good model. How it works, we'll see, but it's nice to see that shift to investing in the person rather than one specific short-term project.
I'd agree with it, but there is a tension there. So Wellcome and UKR about that scheme, they've been open that they're not seeing the diversity in people being awarded those fellowships that they would like. And so then there is a tension between the funders saying we're representing the applicants in who gets awarded. The institutions need to do more to support more diverse people applying. And the institutions are saying, well, you need to open up things, funders, because you're not getting a good reputation for funding, diverse people. So there's a tension there between the institutions and the funders that needs resolving. And they are complex issues, and they will need people working together across this space to really make change happen. I'm really pleased that there are more of these schemes. But at the moment, Wellcome were open in their last financial year. They didn't fund any UK Black researchers. And I thought it was really brave of them to admit that and to put out a plan to say, right, we are going to change things internally and externally. We're going to work as hard as we can to create change. But I do find it interesting that these new schemes have been set up are still perpetuating old issues.
Going back to Sadaf's original point about whether, the goals for your contracts are realistic in the time you're given. I mean, I really don't think they are, because, well, since I finished, I'm on my 4th 1-year contract. And, the last few months you're kind of scrambling to make sure you've got the money in place. So really, you've not got 12 months, you maybe got 9 or 10 months to work on the projects that are being funded. And on top of that's just assuming that all you're doing is your lab work and then analysing your data, getting out for publication. But you've got a lot of other responsibilities on top of that. If you've got students around and then, reviewing papers and putting in applications for money, it's not realistic, I think, to have a work-life balance within that time. And I think it's almost kind of expected that you should, work unsociable and longer hours to make those things happen, which I guess, for me, I don't have a family at the moment, but a lot of the postdocs I work with, they do have kids and other commitments. It's not really manageable.
And Sadaf, you touched on this as well in terms of the impact, in terms of the pressure and the stress that postdocs are under. Is there anything that can be done about that, Gael, or is that just part of the role, do you think?
I mean, I guess it is part of the role to an extent, and I think it is changing, with the longer contracts and the more support that we're moving towards, that will help to improve things. I mean, I think as much as you can complain about the longer hours and things, at the same time, it's a very flexible environment to work in. It's not set hours, so you do have the benefits of that as well. You can start a bit earlier or later if you need to. But I would like to see that this improves over the course of my career, at least make it easier for people coming through after me.
Just to build on what Gael has said, so Gael and I are in the same university, and Gael is much junior to I am. It's challenging for Gael as well, being an early career researcher. I've been there, and like she said, there are individuals with families who have to work odd hours, and it's flexible, I agree. And I think most of the time, we do manage our work, but there is like this unsaid expectation, which won't be sort of written, but it's expected of you, like Gael said. And, I've been there as well. And it's sort of disheartening to see that, within the last 5 years or even more, things are still the same, Like Anjali said, change is happening slowly, but, with other career paths, you don't see these issues. And it's only within academia that we see this, whether that's permanent jobs, whether that's, work-life balance challenges, or, these expectations, the extra work that we have to do to be able to get that promotion, So, yeah, things are changing. I'm extremely hopeful, but it's that slow pace that I think gets to me at times. And I feel that the reason why it's quite slow, the change within academia is quite slow, is because the accountability is always passed between stakeholders, So whose responsibility is it to sort of give those realistic expectation? Is it the funding bodies? Is it the university management, or the lead PIs who have the grant? Is it that pressure of publication, getting those high impact factor papers? So I don't know. It's one of those debates that can go round and round. But I just hope that things change now that we are voicing our concerns and having these dialogues.
Anjali, I'd like to build on something that you were talking about earlier. So it would be great if we could discuss some of the other issues that have taken place in society recently. Issues such as Black Lives Matter, the Me Too movement, LGBTQ rights. Academia is such a diverse place to work. So how can we, referring to what you were saying earlier, how can we lead the way in terms of creating an inclusive and welcoming environment?
Yes, so I think the murder of George Floyd galvanized things at a perfect moment that grabbed everyone around the world, and certainly my inbox went through the roof, but in a good way. More people want to move from saying I'm not a racist to being, how can I be an active anti-racist? But I think we can learn a lot from the Athena Swan movement, but be aware that there are far fewer people in academia who are people of colour, and they are already stretched really thin doing what they are doing. So more allies are needed. In terms of improving things, so certainly at the postdoc level, at the student level, there's more diversity. I'm not saying it's where it should be. I think in the UK, we are missing something like 2,000 Black academics, given the proportion of BME people in the population. So I think there's pipeline issues of recruiting people and retaining people, and there's lots of work in that area. But I think in terms of making a difference to postdocs, I think we do need to acknowledge that racism exists in its various forms, and often microaggressions, are a real key part, where it's not significant enough to merit a bullying and harassment process. So we need a lot of education. We need psychologically safe spaces for people to talk about race and racism and microaggressions. And we need to train up allies and bystanders to recognize the signs of microaggressions. And I've experienced it myself recently and was really shocked by it, even though I've done lots of work in this area in the past. I myself hadn't had some of these experiences of knowing that what I was saying in a meeting wasn't really going to be listened to compared to what the white men in the room were saying. So I think there's something about psychologically safe spaces. There's something about having trained advisors where you can just go and say, this has happened, and, not be questioned about whether it was a misunderstanding. Then I think there's a real role for reverse mentoring. So making sure that our senior leaders understand and appreciate the experiences of people who are going through things like microaggressions. Or, we had a talk from a Black academic where he asked a white colleague, who has supported your career? And they just reeled off a list of names. Whereas for him, he was far more conscious of the number of people who had put obstacles in his career. And so the networks aren't necessarily there. The support isn't necessarily there. And I think there needs to be clearer guidance about how to do promotions and progression, clearer opportunities for coaching and mentoring. And I think that, certainly at the university I'm at, we do have a named person for race and religion, but she works part-time. And what I'm seeing is that existing Athena Swan facilitators are having their job titles changed to becoming an EDI person, more broad, who can then also cover race and LGBT plus and disability. Even though they're still part-time, they've still got the same amount of time, there's still the pressures from Athena Swan, but they're being asked to expand their role. So certainly in my department division, I'd love to see a full-time person on BME issues, because at the moment people are really stretched thin on EDI initiatives.
I think the word that one of the things that you touched on there, Anjali, is retention. There's poor retention, and why is that? It's because there's a lack of trust, there's a lack of faith that everything's being done in good faith. The truth is, if we can start retaining people, then we'll start to recruit more people as well, because once you start to see a more diverse workforce, then you're like, oh, actually I can work here. And so why are we struggling with that retention? Let's be perfectly honest, there are academics who are quite openly racist, who are quite openly sexist, who are quite willing to put their names onto papers that go to international publications and do so without any repercussions. And that's because they have the funding, they have the power. I honestly believe within my institution that things would change a lot faster if it weren't for the threat from things like the government, who say, well, no, you have to keep this debate fair, you have to keep free speech, we have to give people the same amount of voice no matter which side they fall on. We need to remove the power, and the power is the money, and the money comes from the funders, and there has to be consequences for acting in bad faith, for actively working against EDI. It's like I say, these people are quite openly able to do this, and not only that, they're being celebrated. There was an issue recently of pretty open transphobia that we complained about, and there was one project that had been fully researched, fully funded. We're talking experts in their field, and we had someone from a completely different field who objected because of their own personal views, and they were treated as equal academic merit. So how can we say that a research project, a proper research project which has gone through ethics, it's got funding, is the same value as someone's personal opinion? How is that the case? It's just not. And so this idea that we have to have free speech, that we have to have academic debate is ludicrous if that means that we're actually reducing the quality of our academic output. We should actually be caring that what we're saying has real academic integrity. And so we've got to stop pretending and giving people who far too much power and far too much of a platform, because the universities are just worried about being criticised. I think we need to start reclaiming our integrity as institutions.
So Clara, is that something that needs to be led from the top, or is that something that people from the bottom can lead as well, or is it both?
I think, and I do think that universities would be further along if they could. Unfortunately, if you've got a professor who brings in an awful lot of money from the funding bodies, you've got a lot of power. You're untouchable because you're bringing money into the university. And so the actual power might not really be at the top. And so I think this is where, like I say, funding bodies can play their role in making sure that who they give that funding to. It's not just about giving funding to people who are doing really great EDI, but it's about maybe thinking twice about giving it to people who are, like I say, actively working against inclusion in universities.
Sorry, I just want to add that universities, your question, Alex, was that, is the change coming from bottom up or should it be initiated from the top? So universities are taking an initiative in creating committees which advocate inclusivity, diversity and equality. Now there is a drive to have race equality champions which talk about all of these issues that Clara and Anjali have raised. But I do want to say that, researchers like us need to get involved with those committees. And that's where the bottom-up change will happen. If we get involved in them, then we can advocate policy changes. And it stops being a tick box exercise for the institution to either gain more funding or to gain their visibility or get those students or international students maybe who are paying higher fees than home students. So I think there is a balance between the change that needs to occur. Having those committees and acknowledging those sort of disparities is extremely important, and institutions are doing that. But I feel that it shouldn't be a tick box exercise. And the only reason it stops becoming a tick box exercise is if individuals like us get actively involved in it.
So coming back to the theme of today's podcast, what are the new realities faced by researchers, and how can new postdocs prepare for them and established postdocs embrace them? Particularly thinking here about how maybe research culture and environment has changed since the outbreak of COVID-19.
Well, I think the main thing is that, well, certainly at Aberdeen University, is the capacities on the lab space is restricted. So for example, we're only allowed, I think, 4 people in our lab, but there's about 7 or 8 of us in the group. So you're not getting as much time in the lab to do your work, which then makes it difficult, to get the data and things for your papers and for the end of your grant. But also I think it is a collaborative job. You're used to talking, with other staff members within your group and other groups as well within your institute, and that's been taken away, I think, to an extent. There is the virtual interaction, but it's not quite the same as when you're in an office and you've got a group of people from lots of different backgrounds that can sit and help to move your project forward. And then I think the other obvious thing is it's going to be more competitive for funding, because the charities and things don't have quite as much money because of the effect the pandemic has had on them. So it's a bit of a vicious circle, I think.
Yeah, so for me, there's been some really big changes. Thanks to the pandemic, people now know what an epidemiologist is, so they know what I do, which is nice. But equally, there are so many more armchair epidemiologists around these days with their very strong views that count more than mine or are equal to my viewpoint. For me, as a researcher, I didn't have a computer at home before. So I now have finally got a proper office setup. And for most of last year, I don't work in the lab. I need to access secure data sets. For most of last year, the technology for me to securely access really confidential information didn't exist until November. And from then I could get back to doing my research. So my other researcher developer job, I was lucky that the percentage I was funded on that increased. But for that job, I got used to doing back-to-back meetings between 10 and 6 every day for 3 days a week. And it was ridiculous. And so that divide between home and work went out the window a bit. I was actually doing the work at evenings and weekends. So in some ways, my productivity increased. I'm not in an open plan office being distracted by noise and other things. And I am now comfortable working from home. So thinking about going forwards when the office opens up again, do I need to be there all the time? Not necessarily. I do need that people interaction and to talk about ideas and how to move research forward. But I think that for me could be done in 1 or 2 days in the office per week. I'll have to see what my group wants to do, but that's certainly something. I think a good thing from the pandemic as well is that certainly at Oxford, people have worked across disciplines just to make the big stuff happen. So there's far more opportunities for people to work together and for team science, and a real recognition of what science can do, the power of science. That is tempered, as Gail has said, by the fact that a lot of money has been shifted to COVID research, and that means there's less money for other disciplines out there at the moment. So I think funding wise, there is going to be a very difficult period where the hot topics get the money. And I think navigating that will be challenging. But we've also seen a lot more collaboration, not just across universities, but with industry and with pharmaceutical companies and other engineering companies, for example. So I think we will need to think creatively and network beyond our usual boundaries to weather this difficult funding period.
It's been an interesting time. So I'm hands-on. I mean, I didn't really leave the lab, even though I'm not in medical science. But our master's research students, for example, they had a lot less lab time. But that was nice because I was a lot more hands-on. So it was active research that I was doing for the limited time, and so I'd actually say that they probably came out of it with hopefully better skills. But across the board, we've seen, because of limits on labs, you're not allowed to maybe get trained on this type of technique. You're not allowed to do this. And it's the same with our PhDs. I mean, obviously our postdocs as well. But in some ways, there are a lot of people that have lost, that will have missed out on skills that they could have got otherwise. So I run a series of webinars with a group called Tigers in STEM, and we've got early career researchers talking about, and a lot of the students that are at master's stage have said, well, it would have been a research project, but we weren't allowed to do it, so their project has turned into either data analysis or it's turned into a literature review. And so they've lost a lot of technical skills, but on the plus side, some of them have actually said, I never would have gone into data analysis, but actually I love it. So for some, there's been positives. I definitely think that they've lost a lot of those technical skills and hands-on experience. One thing that I would also say, and I think this builds on what Anjali was saying, is that sort of accessibility. There's a lot of people with chronic illnesses, with disabilities, who can't necessarily go into the lab, and maybe we've improved the technology so that they can come to webinars, so that they can come and be part of a conference. I was talking at an event in December, and it was a chemistry event. I was speaking as a chemist, and there were some people that talked to me afterwards, and they said, in my country it's illegal to be LGBT. It's actual death penalty for being LGBT. And I could never go, and I've never seen an LGBT person speak before. But this was a chemistry event. I came to a chemistry event. I could hear you talk. And there was such a power in that, the fact that they could finally see someone. It's like, and so, I don't know, I'm looking forward to seeing people, and I really want to hang out with people. But at the same time, like, this online thing has its benefits, and believe me, I'm someone that wants to turn the computer off at the end of the day. I can only stare at screens for so long, but there are these wonderful benefits. And a conference I ran in January, I had people in different time zones from literally all around the globe speaking, which I just wouldn't have been able to do. They didn't have, they wouldn't have had the funding to be able to come to that conference otherwise. So there's negatives, but there's also positives, and it's how we embed the positives, like Anjali was saying with working from home, how we embed those positive aspects and make sure that and add them to our arsenal so that we can improve research culture going forward.
Wonderful. So, I mean, when we first moved home, it seemed we were all in emergency mode and we moved into this online working. But now that we're moving forward, it seems that this hybrid model is here to stay. From what you're saying, Clara, there's real benefits to, in terms of engaging with people that you would never normally be able to engage with from all around the world. Are there any other benefits for hybrid working, particularly for postdocs or for researchers, or do the negatives kind of outweigh those positives?
I think, no, I agree with what everyone said before. I think this blended approach to research and teaching, I think, is the way forward, and there's a lot of positives that can be gained from it. Whether, like Gail said before, that, now there's a reduced capacity in the labs, everybody goes there, does their lab work, spends as much time that's needed in the labs, then can come home and, maybe look at the emails or do their writing and whatever. And then at the same time, like what I was saying before about work-life balance, if you're working from home, the positive thing is that you can give that attention to your family, however little, with a little bit of, adjustments. But I think going forward, I think this blended approach, I think it's useful, especially for researchers. Yeah.
Could I also just say, as someone that my office and my lab are in a windowless basement, and so as much as I've been in my basement for most of this pandemic, it's actually been nice when I have been able to do talks like this and have a window. It's really nice to see the sunlight.
So this podcast is called the Developing Practice Podcast, and we like to finish each podcast with 3 or 4 take-home tips that the listeners can reflect on in terms of their own personal practice. So maybe if you could give us 1 or 2 tips from your own reflections that we could then take away and reflect on, that would be great. So Gail, if I could come to you first.
Yeah, of course. So I think for me, probably the main thing is to not compare yourself to others within your group or out with your groups on, you know, your breadth of knowledge and also the stage you're at in your careers. You know, you could have a postdoc who's got 1 year experience and someone who's, you know, got 9 or 10 years of experience. So it's just important to remember that, you know, focus on what you're doing and doing the best that you can do, not compare yourself to other people's achievements.
Anjali, if we come to you next.
Yeah, so I think the number one thing is that you need to look after yourself first. No one can look after you as well as you should be able to look after yourself, given the difficult times that have happened in the last year. And I'm certainly giving myself a year for health and well-being now. Beyond that, I would say be proactive, go and seek out people and opportunities. And I think also the third one would be determined and keep going, because academia is a place where you almost need to get used to failure. You know, your paper not accepted by a journal, or find out the ratio of grants that have a success. In one of my areas, it's 1 in 3 grants are successful. So you need to get used to, you know, 2 of your grant applications not coming back successful in my area, and wait for that. So you have to be determined to ride out academic life. And then the very last tip would be, even if you don't feel it, really celebrate your achievements, or set aside a day later on to really say, right, I'm going to do something special to mark this day, to have a photograph, to have an afternoon tea, to do something to mark when you get a grant or a paper or a prize or whatever it is. Those things don't come along that often. So do find a way to mark the good times related to your academic work.
Brilliant. Sadaf, if we come to you next.
So I think what I've learned going through my career is that exploring additional career paths following a PhD early on is extremely important. And this notion that following a PhD, the only career path that one can have is an academic career path, I think that is something which is now becoming slightly redundant. So exploring early on additional career paths that your skills can be utilized in is important. And another thing which I can speak from experience as well is that in every postdoc that one does, having clear goals that you want to achieve in addition to your research project, whether those clear goals are for your own professional development, whether it's, you know, to get more actively involved in the institution, running of the institution or teaching, having those clear goals for professional development are also extremely important.
Great. And Clara, if we come to you.
Yeah, similar to Anjali, I was going to say, remembering the successes, it's so easy to see all the negative impacts and see where we still have room to improve in terms of culture, in terms of our research, but we forget to sort of look at the things that we've achieved and how things have changed. I think having been in the university environment for 15 years, I can see the improvements, as much as we've still got so much to do. We do have the improvement, and I think I can't remember who said this as well, but also finding your group. This is one of the lovely things about having support online. You can find a group. You know, there might not be a trans scientist in your group. There might not be a scientist in your university that's, you know, the same religion as you, but you can find that support group online. I for so long thought that I was the only trans scientist, and turns out way not, but I didn't know that. And so being able to find your support group and then ask them, like, is this acceptable? Should my supervisors do this? Or, you know, maybe other people will have tips for how to get grants and funding. So find your group.
Wonderful. Thank you, colleagues. Really good conversation. It's great to hear from you.